Good. There's Wendy. All right. I probably should do a roll call.
Chelsea's in there.
We need to do a roll call, do we?
Hey, Mark. Correct me if I'm wrong. All right, looking at the agenda. There's nothing else, right? Roll call and nothing.
That's
Right.
correct. It's just a workshop, so we can go
Are
right
you
in.
gonna start?
If you want to just kind of informally call to order and then I can go through, yeah.
All right. Let me do that again. If we could bring this meeting in order, I'd appreciate it. Thank you very much. It is just a workshop. It is just a workshop tonight between the city council and the board of trustees for the library. There will be, I don't anticipate any action taken tonight. It's just a discussion amongst ourselves. This time I'd ask anybody in the audience to remember that it is just a workshop. And please refrain from any disruptions. We'd appreciate it. Mark.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. And I will hit on some of those same points, but just to kind of reflect and remind, the purpose of today's workshop, and it is a workshop, is to discuss how the city of Liberty Lake should proceed with its proposed revision of the ordinance establishing the public library and the respective powers and duties of the city council and the library board of trustees. And so as everybody remembers, this phase of the discussion started back on February 21st. We had a previous workshop on that date, but there's really been buzz around this topic at large since last October. And it's generated a wide range of opinions and elicited passions throughout the community. We understand that. And so as we enter today's discussion, I want to emphasize that I personally believe, and I've talked to many of you individually on both the council and the board about this, I believe both bodies share a common goal of making the Liberty Lake Public Library a highly respected and first-class library. And so considering that, I want to encourage everybody to focus on integrating some of your solutions in a way that helps achieve that shared goal. And so beyond that, I want to remind everyone in the chamber that we're going to be following the city council rules of procedure tonight. So this is a public meeting. It's open to the public. Obviously, it is it's following the workshop format, which allows for informal discussion of the issues among the council and the board. But as a result of that, there's not a citizen comment item on the agenda tonight. However, the city clerk is going to acknowledge the written comments we received by 4 p.m. today. The Mayor Pro Tem, as he called the meeting to order, will preside as the meeting chair in the absence of the mayor. And just as a reminder, and hopefully this is just that, a reminder that according to the rules of procedure, the audience, there's rules of decorum. And so we just want to remind everybody of that and caution against disruptive behavior, because that can lead to being asked to leave the meeting. Continued disruptions may lead to recess or adjournment. And on that note, I want to turn the floor over to the city attorney if you've got any follow-up comments regarding the rules of procedure.
No, I think that's appropriate. I don't think I have any additional to add.
Okay, great. Any questions before we kind of dive into the workshop? All right, seeing none. And so I think what we would like to do is hopefully we've got a robust discussion that we're talking about potential solutions. I know some have already been offered and we'll touch on those, I'm sure. But I want to offer opening the floor up to city council and finding out where any individual city council person or a group of city council members would like to start off the discussion. I know we've gotten some feedback. And so of the feedback that I've received from Council Member Kurtz, Council Member Cargill, Council Member Spencer, and Council Member Sahlberg, I think the most well-formed proposal is Council Member Cargill's. And so I'm going to offer you the opportunity to open this up with discussing your proposal, and then we can go around the horn if that's okay.
Sure.
All right.
Thanks, Mark. Again, thank you, everyone. Thank you, library board, for being here, and for council members. I really appreciate the opportunity to discuss this with you. I think that we all appreciate the fact that everybody is well engaged on this and wants to do what's best for not only the library board, but also the community as well. Throughout the debate, there's been obviously a lot of information out there, some misinformation about what exactly is being proposed. I know some of us have been called some different names, which we'll just leave at the doorstep. I think the rhetoric has kind of gotten us off of the trail and off of the track. In the last joint meeting that we had, we talked about bringing back ideas for ways that we can solve this particular issue. And I think the key issues that we all want to get to the bottom of are transparency, oversight, accountability, and then the communication issues. As I've been going through this and thinking about it quite often, I really am of the opinion that the entire ordinance needs to be updated. And the reason why I say that is because it was written as if it was from the 2000s, which it was from the 2000s. That's when it was originally written. We updated it once about 10 years ago. We've done little tweaks and changes here and there, but I do really think that there are multiple reasons why we should be taking a close look at simply updating the entire ordinance. And some of them would be minor updates, just minor tweaks here and there. And then some of them would be what we've discussed over the past few weeks. So I am going to pass out a packet of material here that has some information in it. And I'll wait until everybody has it so they can look at it. No. So I want to stress that this is not an official city proposal. This is a proposal that came to me as I was thinking about this and trying to figure out language and tweaks and ideas on how we could move this forward. The key changes that you'll see in just a moment are all listed on the front. The city council could approve or reject policies that were adopted by the Board of Trustees, but could only approve or reject policies that were adopted by the Board of Trustees. This would provide that the city council could not write or rewrite any library policy. That responsibility would lie with the library. It would add a quarterly board report to the council from the Board of Trustees based on some of the feedback that came forward in the last library board meeting that I thought was good feedback. Excuse me, I'm skipping around here with what's on the front. I'll come back to that in a second. It would require board members to be citizens of the city of Liberty Lake, which right now it says they can be citizens outside of the city. It would require board meetings to be recorded, which is nothing that isn't already done. It changes the board term from 5 years to 4 years to equal that of any city elected representative. It adds a monthly meeting requirement to the ordinance. And then it adds a non-voting council liaison, which is something that the Board of Trustees talked about at their last meeting as well. So when you dive into this a little bit deeper, as I mentioned, this in section 2C, that would be added to say that as the policymaking body of the city, and upon determination that the best interests of the city of Liberty Lake are being served, only approve or reject with a simple majority vote all policies adopted by the board. The tail end of section 2C, or excuse me, the tail end of section 2.
Wait, sorry, you're going through this really quick and it's not showing the red line. So I see it highlighted.
The highlighted is the new portion. So anything that's highlighted is a new section that's been added.
Okay, 'cause I'm
So there's
looking at-
not a C on the original.
No,
This is an addition.
correct.
And how come it's in front of a D? Is the D part of the original?
Yes, D is part of the original.
Okay.
Yes.
Just want to make
Yeah.
sure that if we don't have, okay, thank you.
Yep.
I'm looking at what the city, what you provided, what the current city was, and there was already a D, establish the function due to compensation. But I don't see that in the version you've got.
I think you are looking at Were you looking at the first one or the amended
I'm
one?
looking to A, B.
No, I'm talking about the first ordinance or the amended ordinance.
I'm looking at what was presented as the amended ordinance. From that is the one where I'll just got.
Or there's one nineteen.
Okay, well, regardless, we could add that back in there. Again, this is just ideas that are being thrown out there. Correct.
Okay,
So this is, again, this is not an official proposal. This is something that I came up with to add different ideas. That is highlighted. The next section that is highlighted is on page 2, which is at the end of section 2, which says the city council review of policy as discussed in section 2C is limited to an affirmative or rejecting vote. Any rejection of the library policy would return the policy to the library board for further review and consideration, leaving any previous policy in place. Section 5 off the top would add a,
Excuse me, Councilman.
yeah.
Are these up for discussion at the time you're proposing them to us? Or
Oh, yeah, that's what this meeting's all about tonight.
These are just a discussion.
Yeah,
There's
this is just
nothing
ideas.
else.
What I'm trying to make clear, is did you want to go through all the changes first? And then go back to have a discussion about those, or did you want to have open discussion at the time that?
I think let's go through all the changes, and then if other council members have other ideas that they're bringing forward, we can go through those too.
Just wanted to.
Yep.
Don't get bogged down.
Yep.
got it.
Thank
Okay,
you.
perfect. Then I will just.
So section 5, quarterly meeting reports to the city council. Again, this was something that was suggested in one respect or another at the library board of trustees meeting in February. So this would be at the end of each quarter in addition to the yearly the yearly report. Also in section 5, I thought it important to put in the usage of computer and technology equipment, which the library does a lot of now. But because this ordinance is so old and we weren't doing that back in 2000 and later, it, for one reason or another, was not put in there. Section 6 under the Board of Trustees. Board of Trustees is advisory to the council, shall consist of 5 individuals. That does not change at all other than the word advisory. Section 6B. All members of the board shall be residents of the city of Liberty Lake. The tweak there obviously is that we used to say that members could be outside of the city. I think part of the reason that was put in is because when we originally incorporated, we did not have that many residents of the city, but now we have 12,000, give or take. So there should be no reason why we can't in the future make sure that they're residents of the city. The term would go to 4 years instead of 5, and serving 8 years to coincide with what the council and the mayor can serve in terms of their terms. I added a G and an H section to just again require that the board meet monthly, which is not in the previous ordinance, and you guys already do that anyways. And then per your recommendation that you made in the February meeting to add a council liaison to the board, which would not have a vote on the board, so they would purely be a liaison. Under section IB, there would be an addition that says write and recommend all rules and regulations to be presented to the council as permitted in section 2C. And then the only other thing that's added is the words computer and wireless device under section 9A, since that is not in there. So those are some ideas for the ordinance. Also in your packet, you will see the possibility of an advisory vote if it is determined that we need to do that, to go to the citizens and ask them if they want to separate and have the library be its own library district. That could be perhaps this fall, or maybe it's a little bit next year into next year. It's true, obviously, that the council cannot do this on its own or in and of itself. But if the appetite from the community is that we want to join a different library district, or we want to get the community's opinion on that, that would be one way we could go about doing it. So those were my thoughts and ideas as I put them forward. If this is the direction we want to go, obviously we could make this into an official city ordinance change. But this is for the sake of discussion tonight, and I wanted to try to throw out a couple of different ideas as we get going. Thank you.
I have a question, Councilman. Was were the other council members, given this document prior to this meeting so that they could have some sort of a
No,
review of the document?
I had not given it to any members of the council with the exception of the mayor pro tem because he was leading the meeting, so.
All right, thank you.
And I do have questions as to what version of the ordinance you used, because what I'm looking at is what was provided to me by Kelsey as the ordinance that was being read.
Yeah, and
There
I'll,
are sections in yours, there are there's like sections that don't line up and there's,
Yeah.
so I'm not, and I can't tell what you changed by how this was presented. You have something highlighted, but you say it was only this, but I look at the ordinance and it was more than that.
I think in order for any of us to really review your proposal, Councilman, we need to have the original 119B in front of us so that we can refer back to 119 and also refer to your changes and compare the two. Do you have a copy of that?
I think we can get a copy of it. Kelsey, could we print out copies of 119B?
Todd, would it be easier if we displayed 119B?
Probably.
Yeah.
I'd be curious to hear other council members' response to the proposal that had been made before us at this time. Even knowing that you haven't had a chance to review it, but you have had a chance to hear it as everyone else.
It's now the time to ask. questions.
Absolutely.
I'm sorry. Trying to catch up here. Go ahead. Yes.
So I guess some of the questions that I had, to start off with, I see that it's retroactive to January 1st, 2022. So my first question would be, why retroactive to something that was last year?
And the reason why I originally did not have retroactive, and it probably should be retroactive to when the policy was changed. The library policy was changed. And so I put in January 1st, 2022 as a placeholder. It most likely, when did the policy change?
Which
Is it
policy? Because
October?
we changed policies last month.
I'm talking about the policy that we're all here discussing, the
The-
policy
The
about,
book reconsideration policy.
Correct.
And collection policy.
was that October?
We presented it to you on
September?
October 18th, but we approved it as a
In the
board in
September meeting?
Okay, so it would be September.
Got it. So this is about the collection, not about oversight of the board. It's about that
No.
policy.
No, it's not about that. That is what got us to this point today. So that is why it says retroactive to that particular day. So it would be September
So
1st.
my question is, if you're making it retroactive to when we approved the policy that is not in question, is it because you want to be able to utilize this policy to then change what we've done in October and September?
No.
Because otherwise it could just be effective immediately. going forward.
The reason for this is because the policy was changed, which removed the right of the citizens to appeal the decision to the council. And so the thought of this and the thought of that date, which again would be September 1st as opposed to January 1st, is that we take it back to where it was before. Just like if you look at the end of 2C, where we say any rejection of library policy proposals shall return the policy to the library board for further review and consideration, leaving any previous policy in place. So that is the reason why that date was chosen.
So Councilman, you're gonna have to really kind of guide me here on this one, because that does sound as though you want to have it retroactive to that date so that you can reject or vote on not the proposed, but the policy that we approved already. You want to go back to that point in time and you want to have the ability as a council, according to you in your proposal, to take a look at that and then vote to reject or approve. Is that correct? Because it certainly sounds like that's what you are doing in this document.
This again would take it back to where it was before the policy
That's,
change was.
just answer my question, please. Is it to go back to that
No.
point so you could review that particular?
No,
Okay. So we can
Okay,
make it
so then
effective
why is it
January 1st of
necessary
this
to
year.
have it at that
because
date?
Come on.
Yeah, sorry. Why is it important to have it at that date?
because that is when it was changed. That's why.
Okay, thank you.
Brad, sorry to, just, Annie, I think there's 17 ordinances in record for the library.
Yes,
At least that's what we're just paying the website.
correct.
And so to make a direct observation, it might be helpful to have the dates that those policies were most recently revised, specifically each, to test for that measure for which is being considered in the impact of this action. I know we don't have that right now, but it might be useful to have that for further study.
I'll add to that one. As I looked at the policies for the website as well. For me, that part of it maybe doesn't even go back far enough because looks like there's a history of you visit the policies every 3 to 4 years, maybe 5, depending on what it is. It's not across the board. We're going to double check everything. And I understand, I mean, if there's nothing wrong with it, don't fix it. But so again, it was 2003, 2006, 2010, 2012, 2016, and the most latest was 2020. So for me, it's all about the policy. So I think we were chugging along just fine, probably until the book challenge came up. And then it kind of forced you, and I understand why, to go through all your policies and double check and make sure you got it in order. As a council member, I just want to be a part of that discussion. So whatever date that is, it's kind of irrelevant to me. I would just like to have an open discussion with all of us about everything you've changed.
And I agree with, I think, the ordinance suggestions that we've made align with what the ones that Councilman Cargill presented in regards to setting up our quarterly reports as part of the ordinance, making sure that that's a part of the conversation as well. So that way, when those policy changes do happen, you guys are a part of that conversation.
So it's not just one policy.
Well, that's what he referred to. So that's why I asked that question. I know you're saying it's not just that one, but he's referring to that one particular policy. So that's why I wanted clarification.
For me, I'm looking for something a little bit different than that part of the discussion. Because for me, there seems like there's a disconnect on does the council approve the policy?
So the last time policies were updated
Mhm.
was 2019. And I
Correct.
went back and looked at the July 16th, 2019 council meeting. I
Mhm.
looked at the minutes and it said Liberty Lake Municipal Library Board Trustee Tom Polly reported on the progress of the library needs assessment. He reported the trustees continue to work on policy review. Then it goes to Parks and Arts Commission. When I listened to the recording, it was 2 sentences. It was about the library needs assessment. And then the next sentence was, and we can, now I'm paraphrasing, and we continue to look at the policies. We're reviewing, removing and updating 1 or 2 a month. There was no discussion. There was no pushback by the city council. It's very obvious from the proposed change, this is about one policy change. We, as a library board, and I understand that the city council wants oversight of these policies, but making it retroactive to the date of one policy change when other policies were changing over the year makes it about one policy. We, the library board, we consulted through Jandy with the city attorney. We were told the city council has financial oversight. The library board of trustees has management oversight.
Mhm.
that policy was changed according to the current ordinance. Making a change like this retroactive when everything was being followed to the T, to the, of the rules. It seems like what the community is afraid of.
With all due respect, I don't think it was followed to the T per the ordinance. And let me explain why. Done a lot of homework on this, and that's the part for me that we need to answer first before we talk about any policies. And that simply is, in our ordinance, the first line says, the city of Liberty Lake is a non-charter code form pursuant to RCW title 35. Okay, and I don't know if anybody's taken the time to look at what that means. But I have it all here. And basically it says RCW 35A11, one of the very first statements. It says the legislative body of each code city shall have power to organize and regulate its internal affairs within the provisions of this title and its charter. The very first line of our ordinance says RCW 35. So that tells me right there that whether the ordinance says that the council will approve policy, the RCW says that's what will happen. So I have a suspicion for quite some time that we really haven't even been following our own ordinance, to be honest with you. Yes.
Sean, can you weigh in on that?
Well, so
It's
I,
public knowledge.
Yeah, I know. I'm just the interpretation piece of it.
Sure.
sure. So the city's a code city, not a charter city. So from a standpoint of the municipal code, whether it's section 35 or 35A, 35A is an optional portion of the municipal code. And I think that's part of the disconnect relative to the library formation and the council's ability. In this situation, chapter 27 of the statutes, the RCWs, is what's the creation of the library. And the oversight can be done in this situation by ordinance, which was what was done years ago relative to the formation of the library and the policies. So yes, while section 35 or 35A as applicable delegates the authority to the city council to govern the city, the actions that the council would take pursuant to that authority can be done by ordinance, which is what was done in this case relative to the library.
And this,
So,
this ordinance was drafted that way from the day one, 2003. It refers to RCW 35.
Correct, Councilman, but also the council at that time proposed and passed an ordinance. The ordinance becomes the rule of operations for our city and the governance of the library at that time. That's what RCW 27-14 and RCW 35A has done, given the code cities the ability to make their own ordinance that governs how the library will be operated. And our ordinance gave us the authority to oversee the library's operations and approve policy. And that's what our ordinance says. And that 35A says that they have, at that time, had the ability to write that ordinance to say how they wanted the library run. That's what they did. That's how I see it. You're seeing it differently, as that 35A overrides everything. 35A, as I see it, gave the city at that time, the council, the ability to write the ordinance as they wished the library to be operated.
35A is the delegation of authority to the council to act.
Right.
So the action was by enacting the ordinance of creating the library.
Because it was a standalone library at the time, and it still is. RCW 27 refers to regional libraries, district libraries, so on and so on. So it's a different set of playing rules.
But it establishes the authority of the city council to form the library as it wants to per ordinance. And the only thing in the current ordinance that the library is that the Board of Trustees is advisory to the city council currently is in making interlocal agreements. That is the only place in the current ordinance.
I
that does-
understand, but the
And-
first
and-
line does refer to RCW 35. So
Because
it's just
that-
short of saying in that section that you're referring to, that policy is approved by city council.
No, it's basically saying under this ordinance, under that, the 27 are, that we have the authority to form a library board. And these are the rules that apply to that library board. That's all that reference.
Well, the ordinance is going to be the rulemaking of how you operate the library, not RCW 27.
So
So that's what
Councilman,
we're here talking about is to clean up the language on who has the authority to approve policy. It's the council.
well, okay,
Let me interject here for just a
Yes,
second.
thank
So
you.
I don't know that. I think we're kind of getting bogged down in relation to the ordinance in section 35. The ordinance is the governing document and operation of the library relative to what the city council delegated at the time they passed it. To the extent that changes wanted to be made, as Councilmember Cargill has proposed, that's where it would occur relative to changing ordinance 119, if that was the will of the council. But you have to look at section 35 as an overarching authority relative to the delegation of the power of the council to act. Section 27 is how you're going to create a library. And so for the city of Liberty Lake, it was done by ordinance rather than joining a district, Spokane County Library District, or having a rural district, whatever the case may be, gives you varying options under section or under Title 27 to act. So in this instance, the optional municipal code allows the city to act in creating a library, and 35 acts through 27 to create the library by ordinance. That's the process. So if you're looking at linear, it's 35 and 35A at the top. Then you come down to 27, and the action by the council through ordinance through 27 creates the library. So hopefully that I'm articulating it well enough for you to understand the process.
so Sean, isn't that basically what I just said? Is that the 35A and 27, well, 35A is actually gave the council the authority to write the ordinance to determine how they wanted the library run.
Correct.
Thank you.
But
Mayor-
the caveat to that is the council can change that.
I agree.
Okay.
And that's why we're here today, because the council wants to change how the library is governed, or how they set it up in the beginning.
Right.
Thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem, can I make a suggestion?
Please.
So we called the workshop to have a discussion between the council and the board, and I want to say that going through each of these is going to be important to understand the full scope of the proposal that's on the table. And so what I would suggest is that we work through each of these items. We're getting bogged down on the process going back to 2001 and 2003. And so it may be instructive for the whole group, both bodies, to go through each point of this proposal so that they can understand and discuss its merits or demerits.
I have a question. So we've seen one proposal, but you were presented proposals from other council members. I thought, and we're looking at Councilmember Cargill's, but I thought there were other suggestions from other city council members.
We do, yes, we have,
So can we hear those before we go through this one line by line?
sure.
Well, he's looking for that. I'll share mine because I didn't give him mine. It's about the policy authority of this council. And even our own website says the city council is the legislative and policy-making body for the city of Liberty Lake. There, in my mind, there's a difference between approving policy and the procedure or the execution of the policy. Two different things. We exercise that in every other area of how we do business within the city. So that's what I'm referring to. And for me, if we can't, the ordinance is not obviously clear. For me, when it refers to RCW 35, it's clear, but it's not written clear on who has the final say on policy. So until we can resolve that, how are we gonna talk about anything else related to any policy if there's a disagreement on who approves the policies?
So we had made some suggestions to the ordinance as well. And in looking at it, in reviewing, what section is this one? Sorry. Section 7G1, as it states right now for powers and duties. The Board of Trustees shall have the power and duty to do the following, and this is as it's written, as we understand it. Number one, adopt such bylaws, rules, regulations for the guidance of the Board of Trustees and for use of the library, Liberty Lake Public Library. We wanted to add in the line too, the city council may reject any bylaw, rule, or regulation adopted by the Board of Trustees only by unanimous vote, in which case the Board of Trustees may issue revised bylaw, rule, or regulation. So we were coming to a compromise about how to work with you all in regards to those areas. Our biggest thing when we made our suggestions in the ordinance is that we want to make sure that we're having a discussion that allows to create a robust ordinance that is outside of the influence of political party and personal ideology, which is why it's so important that the board was created as not an elected body, a part of the city council. So going forward, I would hope that everybody kind of has that goal in mind as well. I know we're getting kind of bogged down in certain viewpoints and opinions about verbiage. So we definitely are willing to work with you guys on that. I don't want you to feel like that's not part of the discussion. Has anybody-
If I can offer reflection, that resonates strongly, and I'll echo or paraphrase my perception. It's important for me as a council member that the Board of Trustees of the library operates impartially from undue influences of ideology or elected perspectives. That's my perspective as I consider the potential for possible changes to our ordinance.
Just reflecting on what you just talked about too, I think that addresses some of the concern about the influence and political winds changing things. Totally lost my train of thought. I apologize. Let's see if it comes back real quick. It's not coming back to me. I'll try again in a minute. Sorry.
So Mayor Pro Tem, can I make
Yes.
another, I feel like we're jumping from track to track. And so and I think in the spirit of having a discussion, each of those points is important. But to the extent that we can get through the proposal on the table and talk about the demerits and merits and demerits of each of those points, then we can move on to the other proposals.
Okay.
And so I don't,
Oh, hold on. So I know that Phil mentioned, our Councilman Foyer mentioned policymaking authority as a concern. What were the other suggestions that were brought to you?
so I'm not going to speak for any individual council member because I don't want to assign an intent. So I'm going to ask them to share those with you, and I've got them here if you'd like to use that.
Wendy, did you want to add to the discussion? You're on mute. No?
Trying to unmute. There I am, unmuting myself. Yeah, I'm listening in. I'm kind of having a tough time trying to hear everybody. Sorry, guys, I'd be there, but I didn't want to be a spreader. I'm feeling a little under the weather here. It would be underneath section 3. When we put together the original ordinance, yes, we had taken all of the municipal library districts from around the state and compared them. And of course, we chose the best of the best. We wanted to make sure that our ordinance was in line with quite a few others, but it is a municipal library, not a district library, and there is a difference. If you look at section 3D,
Hey, Wendy, can you tell
yes,
us which version you're looking at?
it's the very last version that we had. You
Okay.
look at the original
Yes.
ordinance of 119. It had 119, 119A, 119B. Not a whole lot was changed through those, except to add the necessary steps that we need to do for funding and so forth. So this is going to be the same as it was in the original. And that is section D, as with all city departments, the city council shall receive recommendations concerning library services and funding. But the city council shall annually appropriate city funds for the support of the library in the process of adopting a reasonable budget. Library services, that's where it's at, guys. That's where the policy, we figured library services would suffice, and it did for how many years? Until all of a sudden we find out that we've got a board of trustees, which I do not want to say anything, but thank you for all that you do. But they are advisory to the council, not a standalone, as you would be inside of a district library.
So that's the budget section, where advisory for services for what budget should be allocated for services.
And then there's another section in there too. So
Oh, sorry, Teresa here. I just have a clarifying question for Wendy. So when you say services, are you defining that as content within the library as well as Wi-Fi hotspots, meeting room printers, laptops?
services with every single department that we have within the city, it goes before the city council. Every single policy. And it always had prior. Now, I don't know what happened when we got a new city librarian. But as I, sitting on the council and as mayor, those were coming before us prior to that.
I just read you the minutes from the 2019 meeting.
I was not on the council in 2019, sorry.
So, but for you to say every single meeting and they policies.
Like I said, when I was on the council and I was on the very first council and mayor, I was no longer a mayor after 2011. We had those policies coming before us.
Question again to Wendy, sorry. Just to keep this in a productive direction. So by highlighting section 3 under budgetary and under D about services, are you wanting us to update the ordinance to then list what services you're describing? Because are you considering, that's my question, are you considering the books, the content within the library, a service that is provided? Because if that is, then the policies around the collection would then be under service, or I'm just trying to understand what your definition of service is. Would you please?
Jandy, I would assume way back then, we probably should have added on to the ordinance a few pages. But then it was looking at all the other ordinances and putting them together.
So and just for clarification, so that's your suggestion. You want us to add in the bulleted points of what you identify as services?
No, I'm not. What I'm trying to give you is a little bit of background is what happened when we initially put our ordinance together. And my hope is that we sit down with the Board of Trustees and we figure out how we can together do this for the betterment of Liberty Lake citizens.
Wendy, are you good?
I'm good.
Okay, thank you. Annie.
In the spirit of what Mark's talking about, as far as going through maybe these point by point and getting through the proposal on the table, I'd like to do that. I have what I wrote down as my potential proposal, and I don't really want to talk about it right now. I'd like to see if how we can get with where we're at here. So if I'm looking at the handout, which was the 2C, and so let's, if we can focus maybe on the retroactive piece.
I'm sorry, so this is Councilman Cargill's hand.
Yes, I'm sorry. So we talked a little bit about going back to September, and I guess my question is, if we're just talking about this section, the retroactive piece, the questions that I have are around the simple majority vote, being able to reject something that the board has approved. And then also if, the retroactive piece is a deal breaker for anybody. I'm, you know, on the first page of the packet, it talks a little bit about, you know, the key issues, transparency, oversight, accountability, and communication. We've heard Mayor Pro Tem talk about oversight, but going back doesn't feel like oversight. That's the disconnect for me. That feels like there has to be a purpose to go back to look at something that's already done. If it's about oversight, okay, let's, you know, that's water in the bridge. Let's move forward with oversight and being able to look at those things. So I guess I'm not sure exactly who I'm asking my question of, but if we're here to talk about one thing at a time, the retroactive piece to me, it seems like there's a bigger why behind that. And I'd like to explore that with everybody while we're here. And then also the approving and rejecting with the majority vote, because I mean, that does then lead into the next one, which is reviewing the policy and it going back to the Board of Trustees. But for how long, to what end? Do we just keep sending stuff back? And so those two seem a little bit tied together to me. So I will stop talking, but that's my question.
So I guess the first level question to come out from what you clarified here. What is the opinion of removing the words retroactive as of January 1st, 2020? Completely from that verbiage.
Sorry, I didn't hear the question.
What is the opinion of council to just remove the words retroactive to January 1st, 2022 from the verbiage of section 2C in the proposal that Cargill gave us?
Since I wrote it, can I just comment on this a little bit? I'm just remembering something that Board Member Scadam said in the February 27th meeting that kind of dovetails into this. He was suggesting a proposal, if I remember correctly, to restore the citizen ability to appeal a decision of the library board to the council. Yes, I've watched the meeting 30 times. Yeah. Yeah. So that's part of the reason why I put in the September 1st or January 1st, whatever we're going to call it, before that action was made, is so that the citizens have the right to appeal. Now, if we're going to take retroactive out, fine, but I would like to see us put somewhere else in the ordinance then that the citizens do have a right to an appeal.
An appeal of what?
Of an appeal of a decision.
They do.
No, that's the whole reason we're here tonight. That's the reason we're here. is because the
Councilman, can I clarify for a minute, just a second, so we can kind of just go forward? The policy that we developed, they do have a right to appeal.
To you.
The appeal process ends with the Board of Trustees. Okay,
That's
well,
not
that's
really an
what she
appeal.
said, but, well, that's your opinion that that's not an appeal. Your opinion, no, sir, that is an opinion.
No, it's.
It
an
is
appeal if
too
it
an
goes back to
opinion.
the same board.
It is the same board of what?
The same board. That's the whole point.
What are you?
If it goes back to the same board, and if an appeal goes back to the same board, how is it an appeal?
When you say same, you want to clarify that for me, please?
The Board of Trustees.
Let me,
Okay, which is the governing board for the library.
let
So
me, let
that's
me
where we
interject
had
here
it
for a
in.
second.
So you have to clarify your.
The
position.
appeal process is because Jandy as the city librarian will make the first decision. And based upon that decision, if a citizen doesn't like the decision that the librarian makes, that decision then can be appealed to the Board of Trustees. The Board of Trustees would make a decision at that point, and the way it was before, it went from the Board of Trustees
the
to
council.
the council.
Correct.
Right.
That's what I'm talking
So,
about.
but there's still the process for an appeal because the first decision is made by the librarian.
And
Okay,
that-
I'm talking about the appeal that goes from this board, the library board, to the council.
Right.
That's
Correct.
what I'm referring to.
And that was taken out of the policy.
Correct, which is
Correct.
around September 1st or whatever day. it
Right.
was.
And so that's why we're here tonight.
Correct.
Thank you.
But don't citizens have any citizen can go to any council meeting and make an appeal to you.
But the way the policy is written now, we have no way to go back to the Board of Trustees and express that. Pardon me?
No, well, I don't want to go down that road of removing this and all that kind of stuff. I'd like to try to get to some resolution here. So I was just asking for Councilman's clarification of what he meant by the appeal process not being an appeal process. It is an appeal process. It ends with us, which is how we changed it. We've explained why we changed it, to take the political nature out of a book challenge out of the system. And I don't think you can say that it wouldn't be political if it came to the council, because we've already experienced that. And it definitely was political. We came up with the right, in my opinion. Now, might not be the opinion of other people in the audience or in our citizenry or even on the council. We came up with the right answer to that challenge. But the point is that it became a very political arena, and it's a book. It should have ended with the authority of the Board of Trustees, as it does in many places throughout the country. I'll stop my comments at that point. I think we still need to go through all this. I think we need to resolve C, like Annie said, and Annie, I'll defer to you because you have your hand up, even though I'm not the pro tem. I'm sorry, Mr. Pro Tem.
It's all good, Annie.
Brad's
Are we
teachers.
okay with that? Sorry.
I think my question is about it going back to the council for reconsideration being the final step of the appeal. For those that it's important to, having that put in the ordinance, why is that particular thing important? So yeah, so you guys were talking a little bit about that the appeal process ends with the Board of Trustees, as then Brad talked a little bit about them being the governing board of the library. But what I thought I heard was that wanting to have another opportunity for the citizens to bring that forward. In this, so why is it important for the council to be a part of that?
Well, I can only speak for myself. And I'm sure other council members will chime in. And it goes back to exactly what we were talking about earlier. And that is that the council is the elected body of the city, accountable to the taxpayers and accountable to the citizens of the city. So that's to me why the buck has to stop here as opposed to anyplace else.
Can I add to that? The impression, and I'm only speaking for myself as well, the impression I took after the action of the trustees to removing that section of your policy is probably the first time in history of the city that a policy change was made without the council's approval, and it directly impacted the council. And so here's how I look at this now. Since that policy has been changed without any input by this council, without any discussion, in October, it was, here's what we've done with the policy. Let me finish though.
Sure. Oh, yeah, you
So
got it.
here's the position I feel I'm in now as a city council member. And that simply, I have no way now of pursuing a conversation with our Board of Trustees. If I have anybody that lives in the city come to me and say, Phil, what's going on? One, I'm not aware of your policy changes because I'm not part of the discussion, so I can't speak to it. Two, the way that this is being approached, it takes the council completely out of the discussion. And that's my issue with policy only. It's not, I don't care about the books. I don't care about any of that. It's the fact that a policy was changed, regardless of what the content of what happens at the library.
Councilman, can I comment on that just briefly?
Sure.
We gave a report. We asked for questions. Silence. Not a single question.
You told us what you did.
We told you
It was
what we
not a
do, but
discussion.
when we open it up for questions, I would expect that if you had concerns, that those questions would be brought forth.
Which
That's
report
why
are we
we
talking
give,
about?
And
that's why we did that. But
And for many other times sitting on this council, having policy discussions, thought what you were going to bring was, here's what we want to change. Any questions? Instead, it was, this is what we're changing. And so I was like, how do I respond to that? When I had no idea what policies you changed.
Brad, I think you're
Okay.
referring to the last joint meeting that we had.
No, I'm
Correct.
referring to this.
In October.
particular one.
October, we did have questions.
Yeah.
We
I
asked
asked several
what-
questions.
But not,
I asked several questions regarding the policy change. If we go back to the video, I'd be happy to do
Okay.
that, but.
I
asked
stand
several
corrected.
questions, And I think there were several that.
I,
brought up
I was
questions.
simply expecting to see.
I stand
here's what
corrected.
We changed. Everybody good with that? Like has been done for years past.
It has not been done for years past. 2019, when the policies were last changed prior this.
I understand what
It
you're
was
saying, because
not
I went back
done.
through and I looked at them too as well. And yes, there were no action items on the agenda by the council to approve policy. But that doesn't mean that it hasn't
You keep
happened.
saying it always happened. Everybody here keeps saying this has always happened. When we went to the city attorney, we were told this is how it has. So going over why this has happened, he said, she said, this is not productive.
I understand. So I
There
want
is
to resolve that.
a proposal. I'm not sure why it's Chris Cargill's, because we also have a proposal, but that's the one that's on the table, I guess. So.
We had
can
to start
go
somewhere,
back?
so
so,
I think
I would like-
Councilmember Saulberg had a point,
thank you.
if we want to go to him before we
Sure.
go back around the table.
My first point is, please raise your hands and wait to talk, one person at a time. Just some points of order, okay? A little civility.
From here
The
too,
second part,
from here as well.
and from all sides, yes, but the second part is, we're swirling around the same issues that were going on before. We're not making progress. This meeting, in my opinion, was to move us forward. We have heard from hundreds of citizens, I can't verify where they all live, why it was a postcard campaign and all the rest of it. But we have heard almost unanimously, with only one person on social media suggesting that a change of governance to the library, giving the Board of Trustees the oversight, is the way to run the library. Everyone else has said, the city council, and I'll just say, one of our citizens said, the council is moving towards a fundamental breach of trust regarding its role in that of our public libraries. That was another citizen that said that in one of the letters that came to all of us. And that's where I am too. I do not believe that we need to change the governance of the library. The fact that we're coming back again to the banned book section is where I believe Councilmember Kurtz has a suggestion that if that's not going to be the issue, then let's add to the ordinance that the municipal library, the Board of Trustees, and the city council agrees that Liberty Lake Municipal Library will not ban books. And that was suggested by Councilmember Cargill at the end of our last meeting. So
You mean
can we
Councilmember
move
Kurtz?
forward? And I would love to go through yours, but I'd also like to see what the Board of Trustees have come up.
You mean Councilmember Kurtz suggested that?
Councilmember Kurtz.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Councilmember Kurtz suggested that we put a clause not banning
Yeah.
books.
Councilmember Kurtz has the floor.
I'm sorry, just to that end, so that is one of the things that I was interested in suggesting was that if it is not about banning books, that we just put that in the ordinance and we can move on. We can have the discussion about policies and have that simple oversight that people are interested in. But I think the word banning books is actually the wrong phrase of word to use, because I think that in talking with people, there is some interest in going back and looking at where the books live in the library. And so I think that if we need to have a more robust discussion about what it is we're trying to prevent, and then putting that in the ordinance, as I talked to Sean about that, sometimes putting things in the ordinance is not always the best way to handle things. So that's why I didn't put forward my proposal. Because I want to make sure that we're addressing the right concern. And if it's not a concern, we don't need to address it. And we also don't want to address it in an ordinance if that doesn't make sense either. So I'm happy to go through one by one and tell you what I would or wouldn't be okay with. But if we're wanting to be able to look at the other proposals, such as the boards, I don't know who's in charge of where we go next, but I'd be interested in seeing that too.
Can we just?
That's the chair. Go ahead.
Yeah, sorry.
Yep, fire away.
Okay,
Yes.
am I good? Can we just continue to go through this, put this one to rest, and then talk about another one? If there is another one, if there's another proposal, can we just put this one to the rest?
I would suggest that that's the right way to proceed.
Thank
yes.
you, sir.
Well, let me just clarify. We're not putting it to rest. We're putting it to the side for now. And I want to hear the other proposals as well.
I didn't
So-
mean rest as not ever approached again. I meant for tonight, just to put it to,
Yeah, and we might come back to it, but I would like to hear the other proposals as well.
can we go through these though?
Mayor Pro Tem?
Yes, go ahead. Sorry.
So I will just add, like I mentioned in my email to Mark, I only had a couple of quick changes. I didn't print it out, but I'll just give you the gist here. And mostly this is semantics because it's very similar to what Councilmember Cargill came up with. So my first proposal was for section 2E. So it was to add a section E that says approve or reject all new / revised library policies retroactive to the last approved policy currently in place as of today's date. That makes it, we're not looking at any specific policy, just whatever was in place as of today, the last approved policy would give us the ability to at least take a look at it. As has been mentioned multiple times, there's a high probability that the majority of those policies, we'd just give you the go ahead and move forward. What's that? Oh, just say what it was. Okay, sorry. Approve or reject all new / revised library policies retroactive to the last approved policy currently in place as of today's date, or the date that we adjust the ordinance. The only other two changes were to section 6. I split G1 and G2. Let me just go there. Because it was discovered when we, in our last joint meeting, or at least in the workshop later that evening, that the word policy isn't ever actually listed in the ordinance. And so the proposal was to split 6G1 and state adopt such bylaws, rules, and regulations for the guidance of the Board of Trustees. So you'll find that that's very similar to the current language. And then section 6G2 would be adopt / revise policies subject to section 2E, referencing back to 2E, the addition of 2E. So those were my only changes.
Good. Okay.
I just have a question on what you were suggesting for the section 2, the approve or reject retroactive to last approved policies. So is the intent to make it, to review all the policies as they currently are and approve or reject so that they would go back to what they were before the current library
Right.
Board of Trustees approved?
Right, so it would give you the ability to present us with all of the current policies in place and for us to either approve or reject those. And then if they were rejected, then we'd have a conversation and you go back and
Okay,
create something.
so it's making it retroactive to what it was before we last proposed. them.
Exactly, but
Okay,
that would
I
apply
just-
across the board. We're not talking about any specific policy currently in place.
Okay, my question was to Mark. We have a proposed ordinance update too. I didn't know if the council received a copy of that for us to review. Okay.
No, we had just discussed it at our last public meeting.
Because we have some suggestions that would fall within.
Well,
I thought,
I think we heard from all the council members, so yeah, go ahead with your,
Can we just finish going through it like Annie had suggested, going through each one of these things?
Councilmember Cargill's.
We'll just do that.
oh, I thought you said you wanted to put that aside for a second.
No, I said
Go
just
through
do
it.
No, go through Cargill's first.
Okay, yep, sorry, yep,
That's all right.
fine by me, yep.
Okay, so the first one, how can we handle that? Are we okay with that retroactive thing? I know, I think we've expressed our point of view already. So other council people could weigh in on that, that'd be great.
I just voiced that stating policy to be retroactive is, I don't know, irrelevant to me. We take action in legislation to move forward. And to say we're actively advocating to undo something that has been done, I'd rather say we now need to step forward to change something if that is our will. So I really don't see any utility of the words retroactive in any ordinance.
I don't disagree. What Jed said, I think was
Okay, well,
acceptable.
can we all agree that this is something that is not something we agree should be in the ordinance? This retroactive sentence here.
Yeah, I don't want.
Well, Jed has retroactive.
Well,
as
I
well.
got it, but this particular one, that it would be replaced with whatever someone else might come up with.
Yeah, I think.
We just need to move on from this particular one so we can get through all of them. That's all I'm trying to do.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Okay, well, can I?
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
I think we should just get past the retroactive part. The other part seems to be just as big of an issue as well. And if
Okay.
we can't agree to the other part, then the retroactive
Doesn't make. a
doesn't really
difference.
matter.
You're correct. So the next one is on page whatever. We're now on what is it? It's
End of section 2.
there is no page number, but it's a city council review of policy as discussed in section 2 is limited to an affirmative or rejecting vote by a simple majority. Any rejection of the library policy proposal shall return to the policy to the library board for further review. Can we have discussion on that particular one, please? Anybody have any discussion on that? I can add some if no one wants to start. Go ahead, Annie.
I think my concern is we
Sorry.
would, we
I'm
would.
sorry, Mayor Pro Tem.
No, you're
I'm so
good.
Sorry.
I'm trying to read it. I'm trying to read it just as fast as you are.
I really want to try to resolve this tonight.
Yep.
I mean, we're here to try to get something that we all can live with and the city can be proud of. And that's really important. The city is really proud of our library. I mean, it's been said over and over again, so I'm just gonna leave it. I apologize, sir.
Not at all. I'm reading while you're talking. Sorry.
Okay.
So my question about this is, I think there would need to be just a process in place. And I don't know if you put that in the ordinance itself or somewhere, because if we send it back to you, then what? And for how many times? Because you're just gonna end up in this like never ending loop of sending it back if you guys don't agree and so to what end and when does it end? What's the process for it? And I don't know if the ordinance is the place that you put in the process or it's somewhere else.
Then I would agree with you.
Shauna.
Yes. Sorry. This is not easy. I was just getting ready to write something down. So,
You want
yeah.
me to call him?
Yeah, yeah. Do you mind?
No, I can
Okay.
certainly do that. Go ahead, Sean.
Without bringing forward our proposal word for word, but one of the things that we had considered to bring politics out of the library, which is what I'm hearing from the citizens over and over again, is that it's a unanimous vote by the city council if you're going to reject a policy that the board, that is just my suggestion for taking into consideration the citizens' concerns that library policies become a political issue, is that it must be a unanimous vote of the city council if a policy is going to be rejected.
Chris?
Does Wendy have anything that she?
Didn't see your hand up.
Wendy, you didn't want to talk, did you? No, okay. I would be opposed to that. And for the main reason for that being that when we reject or when we tell the planning commission or other boards or commissions in the city that we don't want them to do something, we don't have to have a unanimous vote to do that. We're already saying in here that we can't rewrite it. We're already saying that we can't change it. All we're saying is that we have either an affirmative vote or a rejecting vote, period. We can't do anything about it after we reject it or affirm it. Obviously, if we affirm it, then it becomes the policy. If we reject it, it goes back to you. I'm totally fine with placing something in the ordinance that details that. I think it's okay as it is, because then it puts the ball back in the library board's court to figure out what the policies are going to be and present that back to the council. As it says in as it says in my proposal, section 6I B, that they would be writing and recommending all rules and regulations. So those are my comments.
I respectfully disagree, sir. In that if you are going to reject the policy, you're going to have to outline the reasons for a rejection, in my opinion. And you would have to state what you're looking for in a rewritten policy. Because without that information given to the people who are writing the policy, how do we what do we do? How do we operate?
There's no question about, sorry.
So that's the.
Chris.
There's no question about that. I agree with that. To me, that can be done in the discussion. So for example, if you bring us a policy, let's say, and we say, for whatever reason, this is not likely to happen, but we say, no, we're rejecting that policy. You're going to hear in the discussion why we're rejecting that policy. And hopefully whoever the council is at that time will say, we're rejecting it because this and this and that, or we're rejecting it because we want to see this added, or we don't like that. I mean, it would be very unusual for the library board or Jandy to stand up at a meeting and say, here's the policy, and all of us to say, no, we're rejecting it, and then not comment about why we're rejecting it. So I'm just saying that I don't think we necessarily need to have it written out in the ordinance, that we can do that, that is the prerogative of the council and of the library board to figure out, okay, what's the problem with the policy?
Okay. I think there should be a procedure. Go ahead.
Annie?
I think that this is like the case example of why we need it, because we are here and we are going back and forth because the council did not like something that the library board did. So to avoid this type of situation in the future, we do need to have some sort of policy in place. If the council's going to want to have the responsibility to reject something, we do need to have a clear path forward that we don't have to invent like we're trying to do today.
Oh, you're looking at me again?
Jed and then Sean. Jed, go ahead.
Yeah, I'll just say that I think the difference is, because right at this moment, our hands are tied regarding having a conversation regarding any sort of policy apparently from the ordinance. So this would give us the ability to be brought to the table to have that conversation.
Sean. Share your hand up.
Sorry,
So would it be when the library presents their report, or when the library board members come up for citizen comment, that's not a conversation. That's why we're at this workshop, because it's not an opportunity for a conversation when we're giving a report and you have questions. If we have questions based on your questions, we have been told, like, we can't talk. We're there to answer your questions only. So it is not a discussion at a council meeting. So that's sort of why we're saying we need some sort of procedure. And I would like to I only heard from 2 people about making it a unanimous, so it's not political.
Let me just say real quick, that's only the case during public comment. If you guys are presenting if we're doing a workshop with the library to have your quarterly meeting or whatever it is to address what we're talking about here with policies, then there's back and forth all the time. For instance, when this whole issue came up back in October and you guys presented to the council on whatever day, October 18th, I think it was, we had back and forth. So what you're referring to, yes, that happens during public comment.
Dan, do you have something? Go ahead.
Yeah, I appreciate the observation of unanimous vote of rejected by by unanimous vote. I believe this more puts to favor the independence of the library board of trustees. It reflects that the action in order to not proceed requires an overwhelming, I'd say, unanimous majority of city council members. That to me reflects the level of, I'd say, objection potentially, if that were to ever occur. So I appreciate the use of unanimous vote in the reference.
All right, yeah, no, I don't like that idea, sorry. It's majority rules, and it's been that way since the beginning of the city's establishment. Only one place I have seen so far, any document I've read, is where it says it takes 5 to adjust, increase, decrease, anything related to the library funding. That's the only place I've ever seen more than a majority. So,
Would you consider that?
pardon me.
Would you consider majority plus 1? Just as it does for the budget, like you said.
It's an excellent example.
It is an excellent example, but it is pertaining to having reached out to some that drafted that original document. The whole intent of it was behind, so no future councils could meddle with the funding. But this is a policy discussion, not meddling with funding of our library. And I understand the reasons why they wanted a majority plus one, but this is a policy discussion. So for me, it's simple majority.
Go ahead, Sean.
So the citizens' comments that we've heard over and over and over again is
Mhm.
that the citizens of Liberty Lake who voted for some of you are concerned about the library becoming politicized. A majority plus one, an anonymous vote would completely take that out. There was something seriously wrong with the policy if it's a unanimous vote. Majority plus one would help to take politics out. And that is what I'm hearing over and over again from the community, is that there is concern about it not being an independent, apolitical decision.
I guess my only response would be that this body is saying we're not gonna make policy, we're not gonna tell you what the policy needs to be. It's a discussion, and we either agree or disagree on the policy.
Oh,
Go ahead, Brad.
So that doesn't make sense to me, Phil. I'm sorry. Because if you're going to reject a policy, how does that get resolved? How do we resolve the rejection of the policy so that it's not a political decision based on political interference? How do we get to that point where the policy is based on the best operation, the best practices for a library? And that's a very key word here, best practices for a library, by which we have all gone through the trainings and we have, we have got all the information to look at, and we have an excellent library director that we have hired that helps us come to these kinds of decisions and has all that information. Why do we have a library director to provide all that for us if we're not going to accept those recommendations? And so if there is a rejection, then we have to have a way of resolving it, because if you give us something and we go back and it comes back and don't like what it looks like because it hasn't said what you wanted to say, that you want to ban, or that you want to have the final say in a book appeal, how do we resolve that? Because to be honest with you, my conscience cannot allow me to give that decision to a political body. I just can't do it. And if that means I have to be removed from the board, I won't voluntarily resign. But if I have to be removed, then that's what will have to happen, because I cannot consciously allow myself to agree to that type of a policy. So how
Dan?
do we resolve something like that?
Dan, go ahead.
To maybe represent the situation, could we foresee a situation in which a council would want to vote against a best practice? Could that situation occur?
Why, I don't know why you're looking at me.
I'm just testing the
There's a
water,
million
because,
different
um,
scenarios one could come upon, but
I believe what Brad's identified is that sometimes actions in the library, best practice defined, may not be politically favorable, may not be in the persuasion of how someone is in an elected role would want it to go. But there's some important, I would say, underlying effects that require it to be that way.
Tom and then Sean. Go ahead, Tom.
I appreciate the discussion and whether or not it's going to be a unanimous vote or whether it's going to be a +1 vote. But the issue is the governance of the library, and I'm opposed to it being +1 or unanimous. I'm opposed to the city council having the final say with regard to the policies of the library. And so if we aren't going to be able to talk about that, and you're gonna hear me repeat myself, that is what I have heard. I don't know what others have heard, but that's what I've heard from the citizens, to the tune of better than 95%. Keep the politics, keep the city council out of the governance of the library. Thank you.
Sean?
To your point, Councilmember Dunn, of best practices, my understanding from Giandi's research is that there aren't other appeals to city councils in library policies within the state of Washington. Best practices are that the policy is not that you appeal to the city council. When Jandy reached out to the Washington State Librarian for research on this, there is no other city that they're aware of that has in their policy that a book reconsideration can go to appeal to the city council.
Brad and then Chris. Did you have something, Brad? Either good? Okay.
I was just gonna mention two things. One, there are political decisions in every city department. I could be opposed politically to something that the planning commission is doing. Planning commission could come to us at the next city council meeting and say, hey, we want to approve this, or we want to do that, and I could have a political reason why I wouldn't want to support that. So I think we need to recognize the fact that in every city department, we're going to have those type of decisions. And in terms of the comments about the citizen, I appreciate having citizen comment. But I also think that we have to remember that those of us who serve on this council are accountable to the 12,000 citizens of the city, not just the ones who email, not just the ones who call or text us. We're accountable to all of them. And so while I want to get as much citizen input as possible, we also have to take that into consideration is the fact that we represent all the members of the community. Thank you.
Teresa, go ahead.
Sorry. Well, I understand what you're saying, Councilman Cargill, that other aspects of the city can be influenced politically. It's important to note that libraries are protected by the First Amendment of the Constitution of the United States, the Library Bill of Rights, the Freedom to Read Statement, Freedom to View Statement, and the Washington Library Association of Intellectual Freedom Statement. That can't be said for the Planning Commission. So that's why it's a different conversation about political influence. I also had a follow-up question. So in Councilman Cargill's draft, there is a quarterly, section 5 talks about quarterly annual report. We agree that we were talking about adding to the ordinance that we would have a quarterly report to the council. We meet monthly to go over policy changes. For the last 2 months, we've been reviewing a different policy change. We recently updated our meeting room policy to say that after 15 minutes of a no-show, we can cancel a meeting room. We approved that meeting policy at the meeting. So my question is, do you want us to then meet with you monthly to go over every policy that we review for your approval or rejection? And in that case, the interim from when we've approved a policy, let's say there's 2 weeks to where it's presented to you and it's approved or rejected, we're business as usual. So what happens in the interim between when we approve something and then it gets presented to you and then you reject it or approve it? I'm just curious about how that works for our operations going forward, if that were to be the case. Because it puts you in a deeper position with what we do.
So Brad was first and then Annie.
I think I'll defer because I think what she's asked needs to be addressed. So then I'll defer.
Annie, go ahead.
One of the things that the statute, the RCW says, the 27 statute, says that the operation of the library needs to be efficient. And so what I don't want to get in the way of is the city council having oversight and then bottlenecking the ability of the library to run efficiently. And so to go along with Councilmember Sahlberg, and I've said this before, I think everybody knows that I don't support us having say and final oversight over the policies. I don't agree to things being retroactive. These are not things that I would consider voting for. So if we're talking I feel like we're kind of negotiating here and seeing where if we can get to something. And I don't feel like on at least these first 2 that we've gotten to, that there is any agreement on them. So I don't know if we want to keep talking about them but to see if there is some agreement, because it doesn't feel that way at the moment, or if we want to kind of move on to maybe some of the next ones that are on there to see, because it felt like there was some agreement on, the monthly meetings and the quarterly reports. I
So
mean,
that-
those feel like things that can be added.
There are
Um,
3 items that fit
yeah.
into that category. And so if you'd like to transition into talking about those 3 items, go for it.
Can I
Let's-
answer the question real quick though? Thank you.
Yeah, go ahead.
To me, what you just described is a day-to-day activity. It's a day-to-day policy. Me personally, I'm only speaking for myself. I have no desire to get involved in that at all. The only policy changes that I think this body should consider are the main ones that you revisit every 3 to 5 years. That's it.
So we
Yeah.
revisited all of our policies in the since 2019. So it's something
Understand.
we review. So when you say main ones, can you identify the main
I
ones? that
think
you're-
there's however many on your website, 16, 17 of them?
Yeah, and we
Yeah.
review those.
How many?
17.
17, yeah.
And
So
the
you-
red policy.
I'm sorry,
Yeah.
can't hear you.
The room use is one.
The example I gave is
Okay.
one of the policies that we reviewed. It's one of the 17.
Okay, all right. I didn't realize that.
Oh, no, I wanted clarification. 'cause I
So
wanted to
maybe
show
what we need to
everybody.
do then is identify those policies that you have that are day-to-day versus the overall control of how the library is run.
They all are.
They're all day to day.
I mean, the collection policy is
Nice.
day to day, like, are we gonna collect this book? Are we gonna exclude this book? So if we're talking about collections and where they should be or they shouldn't be, those are day to day things that the library does.
So Shauna, and then,
Let me think about that a little bit.
that's fine. If you want to do that, go ahead, Chris.
Oh, I was just gonna mention, to me, this is a minor point that I think we're getting stuck on. And the reason why I say that is because the entire city runs day to day. The entire city runs day to day. And we get folks coming in here every 2 weeks from the different departments asking us for approval on this or that. And what happens in the interim? The policy stays the way it is until we approve it. So I'm not really sure why there should be any city department, whether it be the golf course, the library, whatever, that should take precedence in terms of having to get policies approved quicker than any other city department. I guess I just don't really understand that.
Shauna, go ahead.
So even though we keep trying to move on, we aren't able to move on to other areas of the proposal. Which brings it back to what this is really about. It's about policy oversight, but it's about specific policy oversight. It's about the book reconsideration policy oversight, because the others are probably deemed day to day. I do understand Councilmember Cargill's concern of all policies are day to day. In one of the proposals that the library came up with the library board came up with at our last public meeting was to put in the ordinance that and this is just repeating language that is already in the ordinance, is to provide the highest level of library services to the citizens of the City of Liberty Lake, as well as to adhere and support the First Amendment of the Constitution, the Library Bill of Rights, the Freedom to Read Statement, the Freedom to View Statement, and the Washington Library Association Intellectual Freedom Statement, taking together the principles. The city council or mayor will not ban or restrict access to library books or content that is added to the library collection utilizing these guiding principles. What I'm hearing over and over from citizen comment and from the multiple members here is that there are certain policies you want oversight of, but the citizens are concerned that changes to those policies will infringe on their rights to read. Putting in that as long as those policies, first one being the First Amendment to the Constitution, are followed when a book is considered, that book will not be banned or restricted. That, considering something like that can get us past, do you have policy oversight? Because that is the underlying concern. My understanding is that is the underlying concern for this policy oversight situation.
Could you restate that one more time for me, please? That first part?
About the change?
what you wanted, what you would like to see added.
Yeah, that the principles, do you want me to word for word
No, no,
say it
just-
or just, so the principles that would be taken into consideration are the current policy principles, the First Amendment of the Constitution, the Library Bill of Rights, the Freedom to Read Statement, the Freedom to View Statement, and the Washington Library Association Intellectual Freedom Statement. And as long as those principles are used in the book, in the library collection, then a book cannot be banned or access restricted to it.
Thank you.
Brad, did you have something? Teresa, you had your hand up. Did you have something?
It was along this.
Next topic.
I got a question. Yeah, am I right?
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry.
So quarterly and annual report, just as Councilmember Cargill was going over this, and reading, the different things that would be given in the report, I guess, first of all, what I would address regarding the conversation of keeping things moving along, just like any other, commission, or the library board, has the opportunity at our monthly meetings to come before us and present what's going on right now. And I think those would be the appropriate times to present, here's the policy that we've been working on this last month. And, you know, if we were provided that beforehand, we could take a look at it, have a discussion, and then make the decision yay or nay. So if we were to move forward with this idea of we have a yes or no vote, that's how I envision that. So regarding the specific things that are going to be brought up in that quarterly and annual report, I'm curious, how cumbersome would it be to publish what books were removed for whatever purpose and what books were added to the collection during that previous quarter? Is that a cumbersome process, or?
I don't
like
understand the
like
reason for it.
specific- Like just the specific titles,
We do collection maintenance monthly.
right? So I guess my question is, how cumbersome is it to provide the list of the books? Because I know you guys are, you only have so much space in the library. Hopefully, when we get the new library, you'll have lots more space to add lots more books, right? But I guess my question is, as you're removing them for whatever purpose, because you remove books on a monthly basis, is that right? You remove books that are old or worn or not being checked out, you're adding new books. Is it a cumbersome process to compile that list and then make that available to the public on that quarterly report?
I just don't understand the reason for it.
I think it would be interesting for the public to know.
Why?
Fancy.
I just have a question. Why would it be?
I mean, for me as a citizen, I'd just be curious to know what's going in and what's going out of our library.
But we
Do you
have-
do that at all the libraries that you attend or go into?
What do you mean?
Would you expect to see a list of all the books banned?
I think it would be
or not?
helpful information if it's a
But
public entity
would
to have
you-
that information provided.
Let's-
But
one-
again,
one-
I'm
one
just
at a
asking
time.
a question.
I'm sorry.
And yeah, that's all I'm doing is asking a question,
Got it.
whether that's a cumbersome process to add that to the report. Not that you're gonna go over that in your report, like, okay, now I'm gonna start reading the list of books we added and the books that we removed. But just to provide that information to the public. So I'm just curious whether that,
Well, Jandy, that's a
How-
lot of books, right? It could be.
It could
It
be.
doesn't necessarily have to
so
be.
it'd just
but
be
it
a
could
simple
be.
spreadsheet or something?
And
I don't,
a
I don't,
website?
our quarterly report includes numbers. You now want a list of every single book. I don't
I
understand
just
the
think it
reason
would be
why.
curious information for the public to have available if it's not, you know, an undue cumbersome process. That's.
if we're not here
Hang-
to talk
hang-
about getting.
hang on a sec.
I'm sorry, sir.
Hang on a sec.
Yeah, sorry.
Teresa, go ahead.
So I'm not sure if you're aware of this, Councilmember Spencer, but our library does have a website that you can go to look up specific books within the collection that you can do from home. We also have access to Libby, which allows for the digital books. So you could, in essence, keep your own Excel sheet to cross-reference what we remove and what we add in. I think we're trying to understand what the purpose is for that request. Because I want to make sure that I'm not conflating what you are actually asking us in the subtext of your question.
Because yes, you can sort on the website by the acquisition date, which shows the newest date of all the new books that have come to the library. The other thing we do is each month, we put all of our new books on the new bookshelf. So we have that for each section of the library. And then when you go to the library, you can see these were all the books that we have bought in the last 3 months. So we do have that accessible for the public. And it's our most used shelf in each of our sections of the library.
Brad,
And then we do also publish our each month what we're reading, which are popular books that people in the city of Liberty Lake or staff or story time that we're reading.
Brad.
Thank you. I have a couple things. First of all, Councilman Cargill. I would like. I'm not clear about your representation of. You represent all 12,000 people in the community. I agree with that. How many of those people have you had comments from that you could share with us that don't that support the 4 councilmen's changes to this ordinance? Do you have a bunch of those?
I don't have a list for or against. I get emails every single day. I've received, quite frankly, nasty texts from anonymous people in the middle of the night. I mean, I've
that's
been
not
getting
what I-
plus and minus all the time. My point is not to discount those. My point is to say, we as council members, when we're making decisions, we can't just assume that the people who come to the council meeting or the people who are upset about one issue or another or care about one issue or another represent the entirety of the community.
But
That's
sir,
my point.
But sir, there has been many of them. A multitude of them. They have kept coming forward. It's not like they have stayed away. They have kept coming.
Yeah,
forward. Okay,
there's-
so, yes, and you represent those people.
Yes.
You represent,
exactly.
that's what I'm saying. You do represent those people.
That's it may be 100 people out of 12,000. My point is that I not only represent the 100, I
got
also
that.
represent the
I
12,000.
got that. I hear you. I got that. Thank you, sir. So, I also wanted to just say that we sat down at our meeting, our last public meeting, and we identified what we thought were your concerns. One, transparency. We came up with it. It's been expressed by the council members that there are concerns regarding transparency. We came up with a solution for that. We'd like to share. You can do whatever you want with it, but going forward in your discussion of this, but I would like to share that with you. So we decided that with one of the things that Councilman has already suggested, Councilman Cargill, create a liaison that to sit on the library board meetings. And add to the ordinance a requirement for bi-monthly reports of activities similar to how the other commissions report to the council. That was our suggestion. We're more than willing to do that. In our bylaws, we have it's quarterly, just like Councilman had already suggested. The other area that we identified as your concern was differences to our other commissions. And so you expressed that our board is different, just like all the other commissions. A board is not a commission, and we can discuss this later or whatever. We've already discussed it, so it doesn't make any difference. Refer to the code and how they are not as the same as an advisory committee. This is more important, though, this next one. Oversight of elected officials. It has been expressed by councilmen members that because council is an elected body, that there needs to be more oversight over the library board. And we would argue that oversight already exists within the current ordinance. I think if you read it plenty of times, there's all kinds of oversight over us in the fact that we report quarterly, and we're more willing to report even more than that. And then changing the ordinance. Shauna has already shared our suggestion as a change to the ordinance. And that would be that everyone would agree that banning books would be out of it, and we would adhere to the criteria that Shauna read to you already. So those are things that we try to address as council concerns. We may have missed a few, and we try to address or come with our ideas about how to address those concerns. The bottom line here is that this really, it all comes back to the one policy that we changed. And there are people sitting on the council who do not like that policy change. And so that's, and I we've sat through almost two full meetings now, and I don't see a way that that's going to be resolved. And it's what it'll come down to the council discussion at a meeting and the next read and their decision as to how they want to do that. And I would just say there's a lot of citizens out there that have already expressed where they're at, a lot. Not just a few.
Annie?
To kind of go along with what Brad was just saying, and then to address, the proposal that Shauna put forward. I think if the board is comfortable with that language, that they're taking into account the principles, and I'm not going to quote them, but the principles that you outlined. And then to address the public's concern that the council would be excluded and the mayor from banning or restricting access to books. I think that in my opinion, would hopefully give the council the oversight that they've talked about wanting, but also allay the public's fears that books are not going to be banned or restricted, and the council's not going to interfere with that. And so I would support the language that's been brought forward by the Board of Trustees. I'd be curious to know if other council members can, because I think this, if we could again negotiate that this might be a possible solution. There were a lot of other things in here that seemed like they were easy wins for everybody, but we did get kind of bogged down in the first two, and bogged down's not a right word. It sounds like it's a negative thing. We're talking about it. But I think if this language is something that the council would consider, we might have a way forward. So I am curious to hear what everybody else thinks about it.
I
Go ahead.
also am encouraged to consider the proposals by the Board of Trustees. I just haven't had a chance to see them writing. I value highly, Shauna, what you've read in terms of discussion and principle. I think that it sounds as though it's fit for what we call the development collection policy as a component, not necessarily perhaps in the ordinance, but that that is a statement, I think, of an important action. It's the one that I think is personally so jarring about the notion of complete policy dominion for the council. So I would look forward to reviewing and in writing, I guess, the suggestions of the changes.
Holy moly.
Go ahead, Teresa.
I just have a question since we have about 17 minutes. Are we, since Councilmember Cargill brought a multi-page suggestion, we have our own suggestion. Could it be up for discussion with council to remove the second reading of the proposed ordinance from the April council meeting? And then also, it sounds like we need to have another workshop. I mean, we're not gonna get anything resolved in 17 minutes, are we? I'm just curious.
Go ahead, Annie.
Could we extend the meeting tonight to move a little bit further?
Not for a special meeting.
Not, okay.
Yeah.
To review, we're not able to take actions on agenda in tonight's meeting. It is
Okay.
a discussion only. But I personally would advocate for resetting the date for the second read based on the information we've learned tonight.
And you can do that at the meeting. Tom, go ahead. Sorry.
I'd like to have enough time to be able to review and discuss. It would have been nice to have both of these documents actually, but since we took the majority of the meeting on this one, and we only have 15 minutes left, I would still like to at least have a copy so that we can consider it and then potentially have another meeting or another discussion, but I would think that it is premature to vote on or to have our second read and vote until we've at least come to some resolution, even if that is that we're not going to get anywhere.
Yeah, I would just,
Bill, it's your meeting.
I would just say that there's a lot said tonight, a lot of ideas shared, and I personally would like a little more time to mull that over and chew on that a little bit. I know this, we're all here for the right reason. We're all on the same team, so I hope that most everybody agrees.
Mark, did you want to add anything before I call him Brad? You may call him Brad.
The only thing that I would add is procedural, like you mentioned, that decision can be made at the April 18th meeting. So that would be the next time that council's together in a voting situation that could happen. And so we can provide all of the proposals that have been discussed and even some of the ones that haven't because of time distributed to everyone. So there's opportunity to look over all of those and provide any feedback if there is any.
And being the meeting's canceled next week, so we're talking the 18th.
April
Would
18th,
be
that's
the next
correct.
meeting, so there's some time between now and then. Brad, did you have something?
Yes, I would just like to finish up by saying that, the Board of Trustees, for years has, done, an excellent job of bringing, our library to where it is today with the, great, library directors that they have hired with the approval of the council over the years. We have an outstanding library. If you've been to other small cities our size, you need to compare our library to those libraries. I've been to quite a few. Our library is outstanding. The amount of programming we provide for our community is above and beyond outstanding for all age levels. And our board has been instrumental in guiding that and being guided by the library directors to achieve that. There has never been an issue with how the library has functioned or to where it is today until one decision about one policy, and that is the ability to appeal a book. And we believe we have made the right decision in regarding that policy. And I know that our council, 4 members don't agree with that. And I'm hoping that there is some way to resolve that issue that gives the library, the board, the autonomy to continue to bring our library along and produce a great library for our community, especially with the new purchase of a new building. The potential for our library is the sky. So with that, thank you for listening to us tonight. I appreciate it. And I hope we can come to a decision that our citizens can still be proud of our library and the things that happen with our library. Thank you.
Teresa?
Just to reiterate what Brad was saying, I want to thank you guys for being able to come and meet with us multiple times for the workshop. It really does help me to feel better that, you know, you're willing to work with us on this. I also want to just make sure that we are extending the respect and the relationship that we have. We've been appointed by city council, so you put your trust in us. We all combined have multiple master's degrees, a lawyer, retired educators, distinguished educators on this board. I wouldn't get a root canal from my mechanic. So I would really like to hope that you would trust in us to know that we would adhere to the First Amendment rights, the Freedom to Read Act, because freedom of information is very important to us as educators. So I just want you to think of that going forward when we continue these discussions. We also, when you review what we've proposed, you can see that we did meet you partway to be able to have negotiations because we did hear your concerns. And we want to make sure that your concerns are addressed within the legality of what we need to be able to provide for open information and access for everyone to the library.
Any other comments from the council? Wendy, do you have anything left? No? All right, Bill?
Well, any further ado,
I think she might be.
No,
Just want to say thank you. Thank you for allowing us to have a council discussion. It's hard here on this end, but what I did hear, I am really glad that we had this workshop together.
thanks, Money. All you, Phil.
Are we done?
Yep.
Meeting adjourned.